Good afternoon, everybody. This is Joy Alachre, and I have Tim Ogard with us today, as you can see on the screen. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Joy, good to be with you.
I'm going to give a shout out to our sponsor before we get started, but I do want to apologize. I have some kind of crud that's been going on since February. It eases off and then it comes back with a vengeance. So if you see me disappear for a minute, hang on, I'll be back. Anyway, I'd like to welcome you to our interview today. And um, and to give a shout out to my sponsor, John Quist. My brain isn't working. Anyway, he is my sponsor from Lush Small Studio. He owns and operates it in Edgewood, Washington. And if you have any needs, do look him up. He does make recordings, but he is primarily set for drummers and guitarists. He's also the lead player for Heart by Heart. And when he's not working with them in his studio, he does do other things. So if you have any needs, do call him. You can find him Facebook and under Chad Christ. Great musician.
Good.
Anyway,
Thank you,
how are
Chuck.
you today, Tim?
Joy, I am well, and thank you for making time for this and for the connection. And I'm very glad to be here. I'm doing fine. I have been fighting. I feel great right now. I have been trying to get that crud for 3 or 4 weeks. Had one bad day, and my immunities must be good because it just hasn't got me yet, but it's trying.
Yeah, it's got me. It got me good. I don't know. For you were wearing those masks. And I think when you wear masks like that, when it finally comes around, you take it off, you got everything. So let us hear take us on the journey of how you started in music, what your influences were, about the age that you were when you started, Tim. And we love to hear it.
Well, sure. Thank you. I would preface this by saying I've spent a lot of years on a lot of different instruments, and the primary end results of that is I'll never be a virtuoso at any of them. Was born into a musical family. Um, my mom and one of my aunts in particular were big fans of the big band era. Yeah, all on my mom's side, I should say. My maternal grandfather was a guy by the name of Charles Johnson who passed away when I was too young to remember. But he was one of those guys who could play anything, play any instrument you put in his hands. And he was primarily a drummer. And I might have gotten my musical wanderlust from him. He was a guy who, this would be about 1900, judging by when he was born. He was a young teenager. And on a couple of different occasions, when the circus came to town, down in the Olympia area where that family has its roots. There was a case where the drummer in the circus band had far too much to drink, and my grandfather at the age, my grandfather at the age of, as family history tells it, maybe 14 or 15, jumped behind the kit, and they hired him on the spot, and he ran off with the circus. And this actually happened a couple of times, and his parents had to go after him, and it was a very different world than the world we're living in now. When you ran off with the circus, you were gone. So my musical background, as far as I know, begins there, and his great grandson, who I'm gonna see probably later today, is another wonderful drummer who kind of a prodigy who has played with Eddie Vedder and jumped in with. They were touring with the Who in 1989, and when the
Wow.
Who's drummer got sick, he jumped in when the Who's drummer got sick, just like his great grandfather did.
Yeah.
And I have a older brother, who is pure musical genius, concert quality pianist. So it's been in our family a long time. As for me, I began with piano lessons at about age 8, probably. I quit them at about age 10. That's probably in what's been a very charmed life musically. That's my biggest mistake. Um, and then it was that same grandfather, I believe it was his stepdaughter, gave me my first clarinet. She lived just up the street from us. By pure coincidence, my parents moved into the house. I grew up when I was 2, and they were driving over the hill, and my dad saw his father-in-law in the window. He was visiting her, and they had no idea he was so close. anyway, she gave me my first clarinet. So that was in fourth grade after they called it the song flute, the recorder. I played the clarinet for a few years. I go on to junior high school, and in the seventh grade, they offered the opportunity to try the bass clarinet for anybody who wanted to, and there was nobody doing that. So I jumped in to do that, maybe because there was less competition. Played the bass clarinet through my junior year in high school. And then I decided enough of just bump, 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 bump. And so I wanted to play the
Yeah.
saxophone. And that same brother of mine was also the finest saxophone player in the area. And so he helped me a lot. So the summer before my senior year, I commit to playing the saxophone, and he put me on a practice regimen, and I jump in as a senior in high school into just a top-notch music program, and I'm 7 or 8 years behind these guys. Played that through a couple of years of college, got into the jazz bands in college. And that was, again, really, really good music programs. We're the baby boomers, as you know, Joy, and there were just a
Yeah.
lot of us. And we didn't have the video games and the different things going on. And so the players who were around, there were a lot of them, and they were very good. I found a really good private teacher. And in 1977, after 2 years of college, just kind of on a wild hair, I ran off to London, England, with three
Yeah.
years
Now
three
there's a
years of
story.
saxophone under my belt. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to be a rock star, is what I decided, with 3 years of saxophone under my belt. And so I
How'd that go for you?
had a. It went. I was so lucky. My musical story, where all this is going, is I have a long history of outkicking my coverage talent wise, and just kind of overachieving and being very fortunate. I had a pretty good run there for about 2.5 years or so, and then I came back, and just prior to having a family, I had one more opportunity at a last hurrah on the saxophone. I went down to Colorado with a country and western band, and I bought a guitar to have something to do, and wrote a few little simple songs. I had no idea what I was doing. Now I have 3 months on the guitar, self-taught, and the guy who brought us down there liked him well enough, and that band kind of face planted, and so he had me play the gigs that he had booked for them, and they were
What
low risk. What's that?
what were you playing for that band when he had told you had a
Uh,
gig?
I was a saxophone player in a country band that this guy, a kind of a small time
Oh,
producer, he brought us down to Colorado, and I had bought a guitar to have something to do, and because I knew I'd have a lot of off time. I had been down this road before, and so I wrote a few simple songs, and the band just kind of face planted. It didn't work out for them, and so he had me cover these gigs by myself. I'm playing in country dives, low risk gigs. He wasn't taking
had
any chances.
saxophone?
On the guitar,
Oh,
and
the guitar.
brand new at it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm reading out of country songbooks, and I wasn't really a country guy. I'm doing Green Green Grass of Home and things like that out of these songbooks, and he would tell him who I was, and don't kill him, because these were country dives. There were fights breaking out,
Oh
and
no.
it's like I showed up at a fight and a gig broke out, is the best way I could put it. And so at the end of these gigs,
I
I
had a
would
fight in a gig broke out. Sorry.
I would pass the hat at the end of these gigs. These people would plug quarters into the jukebox and play their country favorites, and I would play along on the saxophone, and I made bank. And
Oh,
and so then that was kind of the end of that. He realized I wasn't going to be, John Denver or anybody like that overnight, and so he sent me packing, and he shipped my instruments home, and I hitchhiked home. I told him that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have one more kind of experience, and before, settling down and having a family. So that's how the guitar thing happened. And so up to about age 25, it was just one surprise after another. I never expected to be in the shoes I am now, having been a
oh,
professional guitar player for the last 12 years or so.
that's amazing, Tim. I think you have a lucky star somewhere. I'm more like crash and burn country. They stopped
a,
throwing
a
beer
lucky,
bottles. They stopped throwing
you're
beer
right.
bottles.
Yeah, there was Yeah, I had to duck a few times, but you are. I love the way you put that. Lucky Star is just more appropriate than you know. I yeah, I just have been very blessed. The people I've played with, the enduring friendships, the gigs I've done that are kind of above and beyond anything I should have been able to do with such a short time on these different instruments under my belt. I've just been feel very blessed and very fortunate right up to the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you. I'm glad you were able to make it and I was able to do it. Anyway, we do have two hi Tims. I'm not sure who these people are. But once again, we can't see that in the comments what your name is. There's a little process you have to go through that apparently is
Mm-hmm.
not coming through. So you have to include your name when you make a comment. I'm sorry to have to put you through that, but that's the way it works if you don't come through the right door. And even if you come through the right door, it might not be there. I don't know. So with that
Mm-hmm.
being said, when you were in Europe, you kind of glossed over that because I think there's more to that
Sure.
story than what we heard. Um, you, if I understand correctly, you just took off. You had didn't have a whole lot of money to your name, right?
Right. Yeah. And I would say the monologue I just went on it went off the rails. It was a caffeine and adrenaline fueled life history in a few thousand well chosen words. But yes, I suppose I would
Yeah.
say the most unlikely thing. I mean, it's all been unlikely, but yes, jetting off to England when I was 20 years old was the biggest, the most impactful thing I've ever done, just as far impacting
All right.
everything in my life that happened after it. I had I had looked into it. I mean, I researched London. I had a book. I wish I still had this book. I had a book called The Book of London. It was just this very interesting paperback, and it would be a museum piece today in terms of what 1970s London, England was like. I I just kind of got this wild hair, and no matter how much I researched it, I was going to go over not knowing anybody, and I went down to Georgia where my sister was living at the time. Her husband was in the army. My niece was a little baby, and I spent some time with them. And I jumped up to New York City, and I bought a ticket that day for there was a thing called the Freddie Laker SkyTrain. For people old enough to remember that, it was a great, inexpensive way to get to London, but you were pretty much a walk-on passenger. You went that day and you bought your ticket, and it was dirt cheap. And I flew over to London. I didn't know where I would spend the first night.
Yeah.
Um, I found I knew where I would look, but I get there and I go to the London Tourist Board, and I ended up spending that first night in the Onslow Gardens guest house. I will never forget that. I was cruelly scared. What the hell have I done?
Oh
I'm 20
no.
years old. Had a very sheltered upbringing. It kind of blew my parents away that I would try something like this. I guess if mom had thought back to what her dad was like, they might not have been so surprised. But yeah, I remember a sleepless first
That's
night.
amazing.
I mean, I'm 20 years old. I've played for 3 years. I don't know anybody, and yeah, and I had some marvelous experiences over there that I'm blessed by to this day.
Yeah, yeah. The why I find this so amazing, Tim, is I went I went to Germany for the first time, and I had taken German in high school, and I was on an accelerated program over there with the U.S. Army, and although I wasn't in the Army, and, and I remember getting to the airport, and I was alone,
Mhm.
and I knew where I was going to spend the night though, and I saw these I don't soldiers, I guess you call them, with these big AK, whatever kind of rifles, walking in the
Mhm.
airport. And I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. I can see it. I was scared to
Mhm.
death. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden, I would see these signs on how to get out of there. And all I could say, my whole mind went blank. It just went blank. So I can't imagine being 19 years old or 20 years old and going to a foreign country with a few dollars in your pocket and no idea what you're going to do next. I think that takes a lot of something, chutzpah or whatever you want to call it. So
my dad called it no more guts than brains was the words my dad used.
Well, people have said that to me, so I get that. Yeah. Oh, but I never really took that to heart when they said it, because I figured, well, I mean, that's not a bad thing. So we did the person who emailed us to give us his name. He said it's OK Jensen. No, CK Jensen.
It's Kevin Jensen.
Yeah, you know
him. Hey, Kev. CK Kevin Jensen. He was around in my grade. We go back to my grade school days. How you doing, Kev?
Wonderful. Wonderful. So I want to push this a little bit more about you spend the night in, I'm imagining it's kind of like someplace where hikers and so forth, everybody sleeps in a communal room and whatever. How did you get hooked up to Players? How did that all come about?
Well, what I did that first place, I did have my own room, but you're right, it was kind of a youth hostel. So what I did there, and I knew I would do this. I went to the London Tourist Board, and that's how I found that place. And then there was I'm sure there still is. There's a newspaper that runs in England. It's called the Melody Maker. Yeah. And I was aware of it, and I knew I would advertise in it. And I likened it to. It looked like a newspaper. It looked like some of the London tabloids, the Evening Standard, things like that. It had that look to it, but it was all about the music scene. It was kind of a scaled back version of Rolling Stone.
Like that in Seattle. We have a paper like that in Seattle, but not entirely the music scene.
Yeah, this is one pretty much everybody knows over there. If I assume it's still around, and so I advertised in that. And what did I say? Sax, flute. Because I guess I should mention, I also had to pick up the flute in college. If you're in the jazz band, you had to play the flute. So I wrote sax, flute, pro, newly arrived from America, seeks gigs, sessions. And by this time I had found a place to live and paid a few months rent and had a phone number, which was really important. There's no internet. There's no cell phones at that time. This is 1977. I might as well have gone to the moon. And so I started getting calls, and I had a few near misses. I had a punk had happened. Punk was big right then. The Sex Pistols, the Clash, all those guys were just getting going. And as a saxophone player, what am I going to do? I have really blown it here, was one of the thoughts I had. And then to show you how young I was and how naive I was in the industry, Paul McCartney at that time had a #1 hit in the middle of all this punk, Mull of Kintyre, which was an acoustic, just a solo acoustic, kind of like what I'm doing now. He's sitting there strumming his 12-string, and the Mull of Kintyre was this little piece of land off the coast of Scotland where he had a farm, and it's this beautiful folksy song that hit #1 in the middle of all this punk. And I remember thinking, good for Paul, but he probably should step aside and let the young bucks take over, was the thought I had. And he was 35. And to a 20-year-old, that was old.
That was old.
Yeah. So I have since rethought that. But so to answer your initial question, how gigs, I had an opportunity with a band called X-Ray Specs, which was a well-known punk band, and I had
X-Ray what?
They were a punk band. X-Ray Specs, X-Ray.
Oh, Specs. I thought you said sex, and I thought, oh.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, I thought about that a lot in those days, but anyway, the X-Ray Specs were a punk band that was doing well, and I actually had a chance to gig with them, but I did not want to do punk, and I passed that up. Next thing I knew, after I passed it up, they were on their way to New York City, so that might have been another mistake.
You've been back home.
So I got a gig with a guy this guy was promising world tours, and it was all. I thought I've done it. I've hit the big time, and he had publicity photos taken and all these different things, and it was all it turned out to be all crap. I mean, he wasn't a bad guy, but it was all in his head. But I
Ah,
met a lot of the guys that I ended up working with later through that band. And once we figured out what was going on there, um, I got it when that all fell apart. And then I got a call from the bass player in that band, Joe Stusser. If you're watching, thank you very much. He'll see this at some point. And he had a gig in Germany. And so I, like you, I was on my before too long. I was on my way to Germany. I had also taken German in high school and advanced German, a quarter of advanced German in college. And I get there and I was lost because I spoke textbook German.
yeah,
And this gig we did a 6-week tour of southern Germany. We were mostly around Munich playing clubs and things like that.
München.
And I remember these guys, a couple of the guys that I knew in the band, they had spent a year on the road with the Foundations. And why do you build me up, buttercup? All those guys. And they had a saxophone player in that band by the name of Raphael Ravenscroft, who is known for the iconic Baker Street sax solo. And so, of course, the first thing we're having this conversation when we get to Germany, and the first thing I want to know is he better than I am? Because I'm 20 years old, competitive, all that, and their very honest answer was, well, yeah, but we'd rather be in a band with you. And I learned from that um, you can get away with a lot if you're the kind of person who is not a huge pain in the ass to travel with. I never forgot that because I had 3 years under my belt. I was not that good. Um, Another thing that was fortuitous for me was I didn't think of this going over there, but here we have these amazing school band programs. They didn't
Yes.
have those there. If I digress a little bit to my college experience, which is what really prepared me for all this, I found a wonderful saxophone teacher. And he taught everybody who was anybody around here, a guy by the name of John Jessen, who made big money playing in the Depression. He's long gone now, but he taught every sax player from here who ever did anything. And I got to know a little bit one of his other students who was playing for the UW when I was playing out at Shoreline College, and we played a lot. I like college festivals and stuff. And his name was Ken Gorlick, and he was one of Johnny's students. And we were packing up after a festival up at Western Bellingham, and he had played this marvelous solo, and we got to talking. He was a great guy, and he's known to the world now as Kenny G. And at that time, he was just one of the guys. I mean, he was a very good player, but he was just one of the guys. So this helped me a lot in Europe. I came from programs like that. American horn players were very sought after. There were some great players over there, but in the absence of those school band programs,
Yeah, yeah. They didn't
there
have
were
the
about a dozen of them.
opportunity.
Yeah, there weren't very many. And then it dropped way off,
Amazing.
and I attribute that to the success I had over there as much as anything. If I had gone to LA or New York, I would have starved to death, probably even in Seattle. But
Well,
but
I
that's
have
just
a
how things worked
question to
out.
ask you. It's a little off the subject,
Hmm.
but have you ever been out to Duval to play your sax, Twin
Uh,
Dragon?
no, I mean the last
Okay.
time I played a gig on the sax was probably the early 1980s.
It wasn't a
It's
gig, it
I
was
don't
a
even have one
jam.
anymore.
There's a
Uh
guy,
huh.
at least a lot, somewhat like you, that came out to
Hmm.
Duval with the sax and played. He get up and play with my country songs. He
Uh
had
huh.
a, a lot of some courage of some sort. And I
Uh
thought it
huh.
might be you. I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
at this point, how old were you when you finally, I mean, did you make it to your stardom or uh, did your dreams come true at that point or what happened? I want
You
to
could
know
say
the
so. You could say so. I had my 15 minutes. I, among other, I did a lot of just like local gigs and sessions around London. I did tours in Germany and in Poland and in Italy. And the one thing I did over there that anybody here would be familiar with those people was I did a tour of Poland in the summer of
answer.
1978. And I was in a band. kind of a disco was king then, and it was kind of a disco funk soul band called Lady Love. And we spent 6 weeks traveling through Poland, opening for Mungo Jerry, of in the known here for In the Summertime. In the
Oh, yeah.
summertime, when the
Yeah,
weather
yeah.
is dry,
Yeah,
you can
I know
stretch
it.
right up. And
Yeah,
that was a
yeah.
big hit in 1970 when I was 13 years old. And I have a very clear memory of meeting Mungo Jerry, who's really a guy by the name of Ray Dorset, who is a friend of mine to this day, and met him in a Warsaw hotel room. They came from Bulgaria and we came from London
Wasn't
and
that a
arrived
little
there to.
bit dangerous?
It was it was definitely a different world. I mean, we that one we got the red carpet treatment. Everything was very well planned out. I mean, we stayed in the nicest hotels. We flew back and forth. We had a kind of a luxury bus that we rode around in because he was big. He is known here for that one hit in 1970, but through about 1976 or 77, he was never out of the charts in much of the rest of the world. So we're doing this
Mhm.
Poland tour, and we're playing sports arenas and things like that, and it was heady
Thousands of
stuff.
people. Thousands of people.
Yeah, for a 20-year-old kid. Yes. So I remember meeting Ray in a Warsaw hotel room, and he heard my story. You didn't know anybody, and you're how old? And because everybody else, other than one other person in my band, everybody was 6 to 10 years older than I was. I was the baby, and so we got to be friends, and we're friends to this day. And he actually
Wow.
has a biography being written, and he put me in touch with his biographer, and I contributed some pictures and some
Oh,
memories
that's so
because
cool.
to him that's all he's ever done, and to me this was a very big deal,
Yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
have very clear memories of it. And so if they ever get if they keep coming up with more and more stories and paring it down, and if they ever finish the damn thing, um, I'll get some credit for contributing to it. So I guess you could say that was the closest thing I ever got to kind of hitting the big time. And what was interesting was we would come back to the hotels where we were staying, and we went to all major cities in Poland, and we would come back to these hotels at 2 in the morning, and we would sign autographs until our hands fell off. And I so clearly remember thinking, these kids have no idea that when I get back to London, I I have nothing. I'm going to be right back where I was, and just trying to scrape up the next gig. So a lot of it was kind of an illusion, but I
Yeah.
had a taste of it, and
Smoke
it
and
was a
mirrors.
great experience. You
Smoke and
see, that's
mirrors.
there it is, right there.
We have
Yeah, that's
another.
a better
We
word
have.
than bullshit.
Well, I don't know. They
but
both
it
describe
was great. It was a great time. It was the mountaintop experience probably of my musical experiences.
We do have a comment from Patrick O'Donnell. He is Dublin Abbey is the name of his band, and they do a lot of I don't really know. Yeah, it has a lot of Irish flavor to the tunes that they do, and they're constantly writing.
Uh-huh.
He's quite a poet, and the things that they do are pretty much on an Irish theme. A lot of it's
Hmm.
historic. They do kind of homegrown videos with it, and they play all over in this area. And he says, with your need and woodwind instruments, what do you feel was your most diverse or unexpected band or project? Sorry, I can't read this. I need glasses
Oh
that are
no, got
bigger.
it. Yeah, and I can see it. He's with your reed, as in reed instrument and woodwind background. Patrick, thank you for asking and welcome. Um, well, probably really everything, because all of it was so unexpected. I didn't expect to uh, go from the clarinet. The bass clarinet was out of nowhere. The saxophone was out of nowhere. To be in Europe 3 years later was out of nowhere. It all, and now to be playing the guitar, I never saw myself at this age doing that. So it all was unexpected. But specifically musically, as far as what you're asking, I mentioned getting a shot with the X-Ray Specs, a punk band that was different. Um, to travel with an iconic band that I was a fan of when I was 13. That was a pretty big treat. Um, Different styles. I mean, I kind of did them all, uh, different jazz things like that. But I would have to say flip a coin between the X-ray specs, which never really happened, but it was just an opportunity I was given. I just didn't want to go the punk route, and then my opportunity to play with that very iconic band that I had. I remember meeting Ray and telling him in that hotel. He asked me how old I was when that record came out, and telling him I had the record and I was 13, and he felt old, and he was probably 32 at the time.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, so it's all, and maybe the most, I guess maybe the most, another thing I would say would be when I was in London, I was an illegal alien from day one. So I couldn't go out and get a regular job, and so when I wasn't working on the saxophone or touring, I did a lot of playing my flute. I just used the flute because it was smaller. It was easier to pack around, and I was a street musician in London. I would go into the subway stations. A very popular London concert hall is the Hammersmith Odeon. It's about the size of the Paramount Theater, but it's a fairly prestigious concert hall. And outdoors, there's an underpass that goes under the motorway. You walk through there, and then you come out the other end, and you're at the entrance to the Hammersmith Odeon. And one of the things that kept me alive was playing my flute in there, for the pennies people would throw prior to concerts. And I had some unusual experiences there. I remember playing in there prior to, it was a Devo concert. And Devo, the kind of a punk band from the 70s, and they had these iconic album covers where they had these hazmat suits. And I remember playing in there one time, and people were coming through in these hazmat suits, and then they had the Flower Pot Head album in the 70s, and all these people had the flower pot looking thing on their heads. And I remember I would stop playing and ask them, "Where did you all get those?" Um, so a lot of interesting experiences playing the flute in the subway. I remember a London bobby, a cop, came along one time, and I remember him telling he made me move along. That was technically illegal. And he said, "Mate, you can't do that here. That's begging. Move along, and if I see you again, I shall arrest you." And I did not want to be arrested, because being arrested would lead to being deported. So
Yeah.
maybe, Patrick, maybe that's your answer. Playing my flute in the subways, to survive was
Okay.
something that was quite different.
So no, I hope that answers it, Patrick. But I'd like to know in 3 sentences or less. That's a challenge for you. Bring us from there, from that London uh, police officer incident to where you are today, and what in 3 sentences or less happened between that and
Mhm.
where this interview
Okay.
and playing
Well,
and EB Island type.
the guitar thing happened as a result of that Colorado gig. Um, and then after having a family, I had an opportunity to take some lessons, and then I began teaching lessons. Then I got an opportunity to play in a working band that, from 2011 right up until COVID, we had some of the best gigs in town.
Oh,
And then
no.
during COVID, yeah, and that was kind of the end. It kind of ran its course, but during COVID, that was kind of the end of that, and that's when I started working on developing a solo set, and did EB Island for the first time in 2021 as we were coming out of that. I give a little more than 3 sentences, but that's about as concise as I can make it.
I'm sorry to cut you short like that.
It's
But
okay.
I spent a little time on what we were doing, and I had wanted to touch on
Mhm,
COVID, so I'm glad we got that part
mhm,
done, and what you were doing. So going forward today,
mhm.
um, is that where do you play, or where can people see you? What is happening as far as your your gigs and your recordings, and where you want to go from this point on?
Well, thank you. That's all really kind of just getting off the ground, kind of post COVID. You will see me again at the EB Island Festival in the fall, and that is up. For those who don't know, that's up on a piece of private property up just east of
I
Everett,
know it.
off of
I've
Highway
been there.
2.
Yes.
I know you know, and yeah, and a lot of our listeners will know. But it's
Yeah,
and for those who don't know, it's something you should experience. It's a miniature
absolutely.
Woodstock, and I'm probably younger than the mean age of people, and it's a party for 4 days, and it's an amazing event. So I'll be there again, and then nothing else is booked at the moment, but you'll see me at the 192 in Kenmore occasionally, and
Yeah,
Krista, who you
I
know,
used to go there all the
is
time.
yeah, and Krista's probably going to see this if she isn't on it now. Hi, Krista. Thank you. Krista has taken up the
Yeah,
mantle of
Krista
booking
had,
me,
yes.
and she's working on a handful of places, and I'm putting an electronic press kit together and a website and all that kind of thing. So I'll be posting on the website and Facebook and things like that. So you'll know. But
And
for
then
right now, the one thing that's yeah, and
Chris,
Krista will be helping out.
and Krista is saying, or somebody is saying here, they didn't identify themselves, that is free. Remember, yeah, the festival is
Okay.
free, Freedom Festival.
Yes, it is an amazing, amazing event with some of the best musicians in town, and it's just pure fun, pure fun.
I
People
got to
come in
tell you my
motorhomes and
story.
tents.
Tim, I got to tell you about that. I went
Hmm.
there. I don't know, I met Donald Malador, I believe was the one who told me to come out. I did. It was hot and I was miserable, but we had lawn chairs and people were really friendly. And of course, it wasn't country. And I country,
Hmm.
right? So they were scrambling, trying to figure out who could play with me. But I finally
Uh-huh.
found this poor guy. I don't know who he was, but he was part of that whole band thing that goes on. I mean, setting everything up.
Hmm.
And he played with me. It wasn't bad. And I I have to admit it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun being out in the field, feeling like I was at Woodstock for the first time.
Hmm.
So it is a lot of
Yeah.
fun to go out, enjoy yourself, and it comes up every year, right? Every summer.
Yeah, every Labor Day weekend. So we hope for good weather. I had kind of a unique. We talked about leading a little bit of a charmed life earlier. My main memory of playing at EB this last year was I played on a Saturday, and it rained all day off and on right up to my bit, and it's people are sitting in the grass and it's wet, and the last song I did was Here Comes the Sun, George Harrison's Here
Yeah,
Comes the
Beatles.
Sun, and right in the middle of sun, 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 here it
Sun
comes.
came out.
The sun, it exploded. You can see it in the video. The sun popped through
Oh, fun.
you kind of had to be there, but it was visceral enough that you could see it in the video and you can hear the reaction of the crowd. And right in the middle of sun, 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 here it comes, it popped out. And if that doesn't sum up my musical life, I don't know what does. And so, yes, that is a great event.
There's another comment on here. Excuse me, I got to get out of this picture.
I can see
Okay.
it. Freedom
Yeah,
Fest has a
yeah,
donation box
thank
to
you.
help out with funding to put on such a great weekend. If you're able to help out, hi Dano. Um, it might be Dano. That might be. So, but it's true, and we all. I think I would like to think we all donate to it because it is an amazing labor of love on Jim McLaughlin's part, on Dan O'Mac's part, and those guys and the volunteers who do the food. Yeah,
Yes,
I owe it to Dano to put in a plug for
yes.
EB Island. It is an amazing event that is just people do it purely for love, and it's a privilege to play there. And
I thought
yeah, it's
maybe
just a
David,
fantastic event.
sorry to cut you off. There's a delay, slight
Okay,
delay here.
sure.
Excuse me, when I was there, I thought maybe people were going to throw their beer cups at me because I was country, right? And doing country out there. But they were just as warm and friendly and clapped for me in my
Oh,
struggles.
yeah.
And it was great, great. It doesn't matter what kind of music you do. Go on out.
Yeah, no, and that's what's great about it. I think is people are there. People are there for the music. They come all the way there for the music. I've been pretty lucky with audiences at the 192 and some of the places around town, but not everybody even knows you're there and they're there to eat or whatever. At EB Island, they are there for the music first and second, and that's it. And it is something you kind of have to see to believe. I had always wanted to get out there, and when I finally did, the last couple of years, I just had a ball. I played and I came back on the following days just to take it all in. It's amazing. And this might be where I'm sure Joy will be right back with us, but she's been ill and she might be having a coughing fit, so she asked me to just kind of go with it in her if that happens. And Joy was going to ask me about defining moments in my musical life, and so since I seem to have a moment here, I'll throw out a couple. Ann Shelton and Doug Downing, if you happen to see this, when I was in the fourth grade, we were in school, and those two played a piano and cello duet, and I was listening to that, and I burst into tears, and I thought something was wrong with me, and it was my first taste. We always had music in the house. I was well aware of its beauty. That was my first taste of its power, and I look back on things like that. I remember a college friend, uh, her dad, when I was getting cold feet before I went to England, and he offered that I knew I wasn't ready, and he kind of pushed me over the edge with a comment along the lines of, "You should go. You don't want to be 50 years old and wondering if you could have cut the mustard." And that helped a lot. So there've been some defining moments that kind of drove all of this that I look back on. Joy, welcome back.
Yeah, I did it. I survived. I do notice a comment, several comments here that he said, "Are you going to play anything for us?" And I think you're at work, so you're not able to do it today, but we'll have him back on at a later date. And another thing that was asked, somebody said it has to be Krista, said that I wasn't the only country person at the Freedom Fest at the Hot Rodsters. Rodney Lander was there.
Mhm.
I did this about 3, 4 years ago. Try to remember. It was before COVID. So
Mhm.
that at the time for that particular day, there was nobody country or knew how to play country out there but me and this
Mhm.
one poor lead that was trying to play my music he'd never heard. So
Mhm. Oh, I'm sure there's plenty
anyway,
of it though. I mean, it's such a welcoming environment and
yes.
such a welcoming community, and I feel like country would be a big hit there. I'm sure you weren't the first and won't be the last.
Well, the mosquitoes liked it. Anyway, or maybe me.
Yes,
Anyway,
they will carry you
moving.
off.
So moving right along to
Mhm.
your worst and best moments in your career from the times that you were playing, obviously. I know we're
Oh,
going to
sure.
go into your.
Gosh, there've been some embarrassing moments. There's some funny things. Mac Daddy, the band I played in, I got to put in a plug for Mac Daddy, the guys I played with for 10 years, guys and girls, because they'll see this at some point. Thank you guys for
Excuse me.
helping me get ready
Do,
for where I
do you
am now.
mean? Excuse me. Do you mean Mad Daddy? No.
Yeah, the typo. Yeah, one of many of my on my end. Yeah, Mac Daddy was the band I played in for about 10 years, and Mac Daddy is a guy named Randy McMillan. So shout out Randy. At some point he won't see this because he's blind from birth. A pure piano genius, and we played together. Oh, we've played together for 15 or 20 years in different settings, but Mac Daddy had a 10-year run where we did all these wonderful gigs, and but we played in one time actually in a church setting, and and it was a big group, and I'm walking Randy, got him by the arm. My job was to walk him off and on the stage through all those years because he's not he's never been able to see. And I remember one time coming down off the steps off of the stage, and I'm trying to protect him, not run him into anything, and my feet went out from under me, and I went ass over tea kettle, and we had the good sense to unlock arms, and he stayed fully upright, and I when I got myself back up, I'm sure he's thinking kind of, what's wrong with you. um and then there was another one. could have been real bad. I got clean away with it as a solo guitar. I've done a handful of charity things. I did a charity gig. Oh, probably. Oh gosh, my kids were young, so it was a long time ago for an organization called Bridge Ministries, and what they do is if they're still around, they bridge the gap for people who need wheelchairs, walkers, transportation, things like that. They serve every kind of uh, handicap, if you will. I hate that word, but handicap, if you will, physical, mental, any kind of disabilities, developmental disabilities, people who've been injured. They provide wheelchairs and things like that. And so I did a Thanksgiving Day gig for them as a volunteer, large crowd, a big Thanksgiving feed to benefit their clients, if you will, their patients. And there's hundreds of people there. And I brought my boys with me who were at the time were young kids, 10, 11. I wanted them to see this and they just kind of see how fortunate they are. And so I was singing and playing seated, and I did not have my guitar strap with me. Fortunately, as it turned out, I'm sitting there playing, and the last song I'm going to do is "Amazing Grace," and then they're going to serve dinner. And what I said, honest to God, I said, and so for this last song, what would you all please stand with me and sing Amazing Grace? And I stand up. And as I'm standing up, I realize 3/4 of the people in that room, hundreds of people in that room, they can't stand. And I nearly died. And I managed to, I think I got away with it. As I'm saying that, I go, and since I don't have my guitar strap with me, for those of you unable, I'm going to sit back down because I don't have a guitar strap, and I started into the song, and afterwards we're eating. I'm eating with my family, and the lady who organized it comes over to visit and say thank you, and I'm apologizing profusely. I feel horrible, and she didn't even know what I was talking about, and she didn't know what I meant, and so as far as I know, I kind of pulled that one off. But and then I have a recollection of off stage on the Mungo Jerry tour where I'm so much younger than everyone else is, and I'm in a hotel room one night, and one of the guys in the band had a reel-to-reel tape deck, and I've got the Eagles' "Take It to the Limit" playing on the reel-to-reel. Oh yeah, and a couple of guys from Mungo Jerry walk in, not Ray himself, who kind of took me under his wing and was protective and probably would have been great about this, but a couple of their guys, Scottish guy they had, their bass player was a Scottish guy, just a maniac. And I'm playing this song and I'm kind of teary-eyed. I'm missing home, all that. I mean, my dreams have come true, and I'm homesick. And this song's going, and they ask me, what's going on? You all right? And I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic. And I'm 21 years old. And these guys killed me. I can remember this guy. Oh, listen to the baby. He's feeling nostalgic for your days and your nappies, which is, my nostalgic diapers is what he wants to know. And so there were a number of things that went with being so much younger than everybody else. I was kind of I had a little bit of a bullseye on my forehead for that. And then lastly, a saxophone solo when I was a senior in high school, my first year, wearing a tux, a wind ensemble thing that I was ready to go, but mentally I wasn't. I just didn't have any experience, and I played it great in rehearsal. All the musicians will get this. I killed it in the rehearsal that day, and I just fell on my face that night on the actual concert. My sound just I was scared to death, and you could tell. I got over that. So yeah, there've been some moments.
What were your best ones? I must have missed that because I was all tied up in that crying part. But what's your
oh gosh, the best ones. Anytime you can touch people's hearts. I played a gig at the 192 last summer, and I played a song I wrote for my mom who's gone now, and And a friend of mine from school was telling me, my mother is 92, and when her time comes, I would like you to play that at the Memorial Day, or the memorial, and I'll be all over that. A lot of fun things, playing with Randy, with the blind guy, when we were on a gig, and they came up to us in between songs with a paper plate they had punched a bunch of holes through, and told him, this is Braille for "We love you, Mac Daddy," and because
Oh,
they kind of,
love
he
it.
couldn't see him, so they had to hear him. And then I guess one of my really great, the things that makes me the happiest is to know that there are so many people. I talked about the school music programs. There are so many people that I'm back in touch with thanks to social media. So many of my like high school contemporaries are still doing music. And some of the band kids are singing in choirs, and the choir kids are playing instruments, and so many of them are still doing it. And I would say, as a highlight, the Rose Bowl parade as a senior in 1970, New Year's Day 1975 was a big highlight. And I think that's something I would throw out there just in general, is that the things I did for free, um, or when very few people are watching, um, those school days, those things are as meaningful, and as they were as much fun, and the memories mean as much to me as do the memories of playing for 15,000
Yes.
people in support of an iconic rock band. It's all gravy, and I'm very grateful for those things. Some friends' weddings, things like that.
Yeah, I get it. Oh, that's yeah. Been there, done that. Know what you mean.
Sure.
So when you look in your looking glass, because we're kind of having this interview before you're totally off the ground. I mean, this plane
Sure.
is just approaching the runway. It hasn't taken off yet. So what what would you like to see happening, um, if we're given another 5 years, in good
Sure.
health and still capable of playing in that period of
Well,
time?
that's it right there. You don't take anything for granted. A
Yeah.
friend of mine who's a very good musician he went and saw. We talked about this. He went and saw Paul McCartney at Climate Pledge, and Paul was 80 years old last summer. His voice is gone, but it's a love fest. And I am well aware that I am not Paul McCartney. And if I'm 80 years old, my voice is gone. Nobody's going to come and see me. So I would like to. I've recorded some songs. We're going to redo them. My great friend Jerry is another guy. Jerry Slater, I need to give a shout out to, who does my live sound and records me. And we're going to get. I've written some more. Some of the best things I've ever written have been written kind of in the wake of Me Too. That whole movement. Just some of the stories I've heard about how people treat each other. It was one of those songs that got Krista's attention, and we became friends. I want to get those recorded. I'd like to have those heard. I want to touch as many hearts. That's what it's about for me now. I want to go back to where I was at that fourth grade program when Ann and Doug played that piano cello duet, and I burst into tears. I I I would like to do what I can do to bring about healing, to just touch people's hearts, and just be a blessing. Get my songs out there, play while I still can do it. You mentioned health. Yeah, I don't take any of this for granted. Just get out and do as much of this as I can with whatever time I have left, knowing that there are no guarantees on our birth certificates.
Absolutely. And I do want to say something. I don't usually talk about this, but a lot of people who know me know, um, I turn 80 in October,
Mm-hmm.
and my fingers are still working. I'm not the greatest guitar player in the world. My voice was still working up until February,
Mm-hmm.
still singing. And I talked to a young lady who's just turning 50, singer out there,
Mm-hmm.
a rock singer, and she said, wow, um, it's hard for me to picture another 30 years of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? If you're supposed to do it and you want to do it and your ability to do it is there, it can go any, I know of a lady, I can't, they call her something guitar. can't think of her name right now. My husband knows her, but she was playing in her 90s, and the guys would say, you know, we just sit back and let her go and try to play with her and keep up. You know, there is no
Sure.
limit. There is limitations, but there is no limit, and there's always a way around it. I had this keyboard player in my band. We went from 2000 2015. She now has arthritis in her hands, has started playing the
Sure.
ukulele
Sure.
and still sings. I mean, like you started with sax, you're on guitar now. If your fingers go out, there's keyboard. I mean, there's always something out there. You started with piano, I'm sure you could go back. So
Yeah.
just a thing to say here for me is that there is no end unless you want it to. And unless the gods do not smile on you. Like you say, it's a luck of the draw. You never know when that card's going to come up.
Sure. Well, and you're an inspiration to me and many others, I'm sure. And we all know that check engine light's going to come on. I also know that Duke Ellington's musicians, they played those old big band guys, they played until their hands gave out or whatever. And now it's rock and roll musicians, and we have no intention of stopping. But yeah, it's a blessing and a privilege to be able to do
Yes.
this, and nothing is guaranteed. And I want to be like you when I'm
Well, I
close
don't
to
know.
80, which is going to be in about a week. I still hope to be going.
Absolutely. Just a shout out there. I had a guest on here not too long ago, and that shocked me. I had no idea. And he's looking for a kidney. And I asked him about 5 years, talk about faux pas. And he said, well, if I'm around, you know, I like almost fell off my chair, and I thought, oh, faux pas,
Sure.
darn, you know. But the thing is, this man, as sick as he is still making music, is still working at it, still being, you know, out there. And, you know, it can't keep a good person down, yeah, especially if
That's
they're a
right.
musician.
Yeah.
So
God
now
bless
I've
him.
had this pep talk.
And none of
What,
us knows.
that's right. So I
Yeah.
think the one thing that I've learned from all of the people that I've had on here to interview is there are a tremendous amount of barriers for people out there. Age is just one of them. There are a lot worse things out there. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's just if you have that desire, it somehow finds its way. I don't know how, but it does.
Yeah. Oh, I mentioned my college friend's dad, and how it wasn't his exact words, but you don't want to be 50 years old and not know whether you could have cut the mustard
Exactly.
before I went to Europe.
You know, I thought
I'm
about
still
that.
there. I'm trying this now, and I still want to know, can I cut
Yeah.
the mustard? So we'll see how it goes.
You know, I've been thinking about what he said, and I thought, okay, yeah, what you did was very brave and courageous, and you were very, very lucky, and they're born under the right stars, I guess. But you know, it doesn't always happen in early in life. I mean, sometimes there are people out there that I've interviewed that have just come out in, you know, since they've had their families and now have the free time to go back to something that they had a passion for earlier. And it's those bands and those musical programs that they have in schools that's hook you. You usually come around.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And that's what thrills me, seeing people I've known since I was a teenager or before, and that they're still doing it. That just thrills me.
yes, I had a lead. I mean, I didn't mean to get off in this tangent, but now that we're on it,
Mhm.
I had this
No.
lead. I had a lead. His name is Bill Garner. He was inducted in the Western String Society, and he was a professional musician all his life. Was hit by a T-bone by a drunk driver and broke his back. That man, I met him out at a place called Wagon Wheel in the middle of nowhere, Washington, and I was out there and he was playing his guitar, and I looked at him in a wheelchair playing, big man, and you know, tall guy, sitting in that wheelchair playing his guitar, and I thought, oh my God, that guy is good. So at some point down the road, I asked him to be might get my lead. And
Mhm.
he could have had half his brain removed and still played like he was,
Mhm.
the guy was phenomenal. And up
Mhm.
until 2 weeks before he died, he continued to play with me and loved it. And, no barriers. Too welcome
Got it.
these
And
people in your
so
life.
thank you for that. Now I have the rest of the story on the guy you were talking about. That's good to know and good for him. He all until I have said until they put me in the ground, and he did that. He lived that out, and good for him. I think that's great.
Yes. Yes. So with that, I think we're getting really close. I'm
Mhm.
going to go over a couple of minutes, I'm afraid, because there's one more question I have to
Mhm.
ask you. And other than what we were just talking about, which is part of the question, answer to the question, but what
Mhm.
advice do you have for people coming up? I mean, not everybody starts out young, and not
Uh-huh.
everybody starts out in the middle of their life or when they're older. However, there are younger people who I put on mature musicians because their
Mhm.
music is matured, and people struggling to get singer-songwriters to get noticed and have people
Mhm.
listen to the music they're putting out there. What would your advice after all this time be to them?
A few things I would
Or what is
say.
your advice? Sorry.
Practice. I mean, I had to picking up the saxophone as I did, and I had to catch up as a senior in high school. I practiced hard. That's a big one. I would encourage, especially younger people, um, that feel like I've just some of the ways I was so fortunate that I hope I bring some credibility to the table when I tell younger people that your dreams are in fact your possibilities, and that boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Um,
Absolutely.
and I would echo the advice my college friend's father gave me. Go for it. The worst thing that can possibly happen is you can fall on your face, but you won't be later in life. You won't be again wondering if you could have cut the mustard. Um, just don't give up,
I
and
love
work
that.
hard and put yourself. And I remember the words of my bass player friend of Joe over when I was going on that gig in Germany. Asking about the Baker Street sax player, that wonderful iconic sax solo, when he said, yeah, he was definitely better, but we would rather be in a band with you. So I would say, I mean, the same advice I would give somebody going into a musical situation that I would give somebody going into a marriage. Don't think about finding the right person. Think about being the right person.
Being the right
And
person. I love it.
and be
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
yeah. I think
Thank you.
that might sum it up.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. I enjoyed the session together, and I do hope that we get you back in the future with
Mhm.
some gigs and so forth rolling, your website up, and everything else. In the meantime, the next place that we can find you is the EB Frina Festival.
That's what I know for sure. And then I'm working on a couple of things with Krista and with a couple of other places. I'll post them on the MM
Or for
site.
future musicians.
They'll be on my Facebook page, and I'll get the word out.
All right, perfect. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you,
All
everybody,
right.
for listening. I'll be talking to you again. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for joining us. And goodbye,
Thank-
Tim. I'm going to miss you, but I will keep watching you.
I'm around. Thanks, Joy. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye. Well, that does it for this session. I do hope you enjoyed our interview. And I will keep my eyes on Tim. He's a good player, he's a good musician, a good songwriter. And I think we're going to see a lot more of him in the future. So stay tuned. In the meantime, have a good rest of your week. And hopefully, this cough will be gone by next Monday so you don't have to put up with this. Bye, everybody. Take care. See you down the road. Let's see if I can get out of this gracefully. Bye.